This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Welcome to Militantly Mixed, the Black as Fuck edition, the podcast about blackness from the mixed black perspective. And I say it every time because we're mixed, but we're black.
Right.
So welcome.
Welcome.
What's happening, man?
Nothing, just having a week. How about you?
Yeah, man. Hey, I'm in the same boat, man. Same boats, man.
So last week was pretty much every black podcaster had a podcast about Colin Kaepernick. And
Right.
And so I'm sitting there tweeting for us like, hey, I know there's a lot of podcasts out there about Colin Kaepernick, but we're actually talking about it from being the mixed black, so listen to ours.
Right. I mean, we have a unique perspective, guys.
Right?
Guys?
Right?
You like guys?
So yeah, hopefully we get a few more listeners on it, because I'm sure the internet was just saturated with anything having to do with Kaepernick last week.
Yeah. That was yeah, did you hear that the internet sales went up 31%?
Yeah, I saw that. That's crazy.
And
his jerseys, those special jerseys, sold out in like 2 hours.
Right. And LeBron sent a tweet earlier today, and it said Nike stock hits all-time high.
Damn.
After new Kaepernick ad. It says, well, he said, well, I guess we're on, and he put fire. Joke's on you. And then he put Nike lifer. So yeah, it went down a couple dollars, but it's weird because Adidas went down, all them other places went down. So, all the other shoe places went down.
Oh, really?
And they made a rebound. So
well, I saw a couple of things online too that was saying like New Balance is stepping up to be the conservative shoe or whatever, but it was like something from 2014 or something. So people don't pay attention to dates when they start sharing shit.
Yeah.
But cool. Like I hope it works. I also hope that Colin kind of leverages this attention and all this extra stuff to be like, oh, and by the way, can you pay your workers a little bit more and not have them in sweatshops? Thanks.
Right. You know what I mean? Because you want to kind of, I understood that position. A lot of people were like, well, hey, but it's okay if you guys talk about black people get killed, but what about the people in the sweatshops? And I was like, I can be mad about that, as well as having them come out and so they're not mutually exclusive, but also you were kind of shirking, you were kind of just trying to find another way to be against something. Like, oh, okay. Well, I'm okay with their ad, but that company does this. Well, fuck out of here.
That's okay too. Like if someone wants to be that way, that's. I have a couple friends that are on that tip too. They're like, I'm going to go ahead and support this campaign, but I'm not going to support the company. I'm not going to pay for anything. I'm not going to buy anything. It's like, all right, fine.
Right. That's perfect. You can do that. You know that
too. But that brings us to this week's topic, which this will probably come up all the time because it does come up all the time. It just seems to be this is I call it like the Diet Coke version of racism, where you want to pretend you're an ally or think actually that you are an ally while you're sitting there saying things like, I just don't see color, or
I'm colorblind.
I'm colorblind. So we're going to talk about colorblindness today. I actually got, I have a couple of white girl friends that, they really work hard to be allies and things like that. I think I've talked about one of my friends before. I refer to her as my woke white woman whisperer, because she actually is one person that will like put her body in the way of people of color in public spaces when things go down. So she's mentioned some things a few times, and then actually someone we both went to high school with hit me up over the weekend and was like, hey, I got a question because I'm trying to figure some stuff out. I'm trying to figure out how to do this right. And because of that, it had me looking into colorblindness, and a lot of the questions that she had to do with things like, well, what if I do just think of someone as like, you're just regular, and I wasn't paying attention to the fact that you were black or you were Latinx or whatever. And so I was kind of trying to explain it to her. So I thought we could use that since it was something that I got into into so much this week. Maybe it's something we could talk about together.
Right.
Colorblindness is one of those things where it's the well-intentioned person, white person, who says, you know, they want to come off as non-racist or they want to come off as non-oppressive, and they'll say something like, well, I just don't see color, or I just think of you as a regular person, or the worst one, the one that makes me gag every time, is I just see a human. Yeah. Like, I get it. I get what you're trying to say. You're like, let me be wonderful at you right now. Like, I understand. But what people don't seem to understand is that it erases the identity, because, I mean, your lived experience does have a lot to do with your race, regardless of whether or not a person wants to see race or whether or not they want to even just deal with it. I get that. Like, race can be pretty dicey and sometimes you just don't want to deal with it. I get that. But to say that you just see a person for being a human or you don't see color, you are erasing all the stuff that they have to go through as a result of their skin color. And in your attempt of being cool, you're fucking that up, you know?
Right. I look at it as like a literal white lie. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, in a sense, it's them, you know, I mean, it's an easy out in a sense. Like, hey, I see you as you, and that's all I see. I don't see, you know what I mean? Yeah. But in a sense that it is something, it's one of those things where you can't not see that because we don't have the same experience. And it kind of makes our experiences your experience. Like, you know, obviously you think that everybody has the same experience, because if I don't see race, that means that everybody has done the same thing. Everybody has gone through the same, you know, same
everybody
trials and tribulations,
and
it's different.
Everybody has the same chances, you know, and this is just not realistic to think is going to happen. It's kind of like the people who try to say, you know, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you know, you work hard and you'll get there. Well, I know plenty of people who have busted their ass for their whole lives, who have worked multiple jobs. I mean, my husband and I are two of those people. We worked really hard to get through school. We have master's degrees. We are almost always close to the poverty line. Like, it doesn't matter. There's been times when I've made a decent amount of money, and then times when I just haven't. You know, my husband is an adjunct professor. He doesn't get benefits but he works as hard as a full-time professor does. So there's like, to think that people have the same opportunities if they just work hard is unrealistic, because in some cases there are ways in which people of color are not going to have the same opportunities. So if you use colorblindness as a way to sort of even the playing field, the only way to make that work is if you use colorblindness and set it at the level that most poor or people of color, you know. Right.
You make it default color of the sameness is white. Yeah. That's kind of, you know what I mean? Like, they make it, because that's what they're really saying, is everybody is at the default.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't understand why in mass white people don't tend to understand that life is different for us, or that they close their eyes to the different types of prejudices that we have. I understand it being uncomfortable for people to know that this is true, that this happens. I understand that people don't want to know that this kind of stuff happens, but it's unrealistic to expect that, and it's just false. I mean, the thing is, we don't have an even playing field, and so colorblindness only serves to make it, you know, more difficult, because you're trying to say, oh, it's not that, you know, you don't have anything different than me. Your experience doesn't actually impact your ability to get a job, getting certain housing in certain places or whatever. It's just so unrealistic. So I pulled up a couple of little pieces, but there was this article that has circulated a bunch, and it popped back up in my view this week, which was an article in The Atlantic called Colorblindness is Counterproductive, written by Adia Harvey Wingfield back in 2015. And it's basically sociologists arguing as to why the ideologies claiming not to see race risks ignoring discrimination. And that seems to be like the heart of why people of color find colorblindness so frustrating. And why, I still don't think anybody seems to understand why white people in mass, not certain white people, but in large groups, don't seem to understand that this happens. And so it actually kind of pushes it back down to kind of before the civil rights era, in which it was perfectly legal to deny black people housing or jobs or the right to vote, all based, you know, just on their race. Like, it was in the first half of the 20th century that this was possible. It's states post-slavery, they're free, but they're in some cases not even citizens, and it was entirely legal to do this. And that mentality pushes on through the ages. Even as we're making progress in different areas, you still have people alive who think that this stuff is okay, and they're passing on that knowledge, and that kind of stuff gets into the next generation. And even as they, might exist in a world where there are changes, like say when the Civil Rights Act was signed and things, effectively legally changed for people of color, there was still, it still takes a long time for people to adapt to a change. It still takes, you're not going to change minds because you change a law necessarily. And so it continues to perpetuate throughout time. And so they ended up finding other ways to discriminate. Like, instead of outright saying it's because you're black or because you're a single mother or because of this, they find some other thing, to get in the way. But really it's just because they're not allowed anymore to say that it's about your race. And this, this kind of stuff is continuing on into what we're doing now. And so the way I'm seeing it even now with colorblindness is this age of wokeness, which even that word is starting to get pretty tired. A person wants to seem like they're down so bad, and for some reason they think the way to seem down is to say, I no longer see you as anything different, and it's too soon.
Right. It's weird how some people do not realize that, like my dad went, like I said before on this podcast, my dad went to a segregated school. So It's not like it's super separate, you know what I mean? And like all we want people to do is say, I see you. Is that it? That way I see you. I see you. I see your struggle. I see the things are different. I see that we need to make extra efforts to level the playing fields. Right. To make you part of the norm. I think that's, and that's why we push representation. That's why we talk about how much representation matters. When people say, so I was using in this discussion that I was having earlier this week with someone who asked me the question, I use the idea between sickle cell anemia and cystic fibrosis as a way to kind of explain the difference between why color, like it was my way of explaining how colorblindness doesn't work. So back in the 70s, sickle cell anemia started to rise to public knowledge because the Black Panthers were beginning to screen for sickle cell in the communities, and then eventually they were sort of sponsoring or supporting doctors that were pushing, Black doctors that were going out there, they were going on TV programs, and they were saying like, look, sickle cell anemia is a real problem. It mostly affects the Black communities, a little bit of the Latin community, and even less of the white community, but it's a killer, and there's ways we can prevent it from happening, and those ways are, people who are carriers of sickle cell not passing on the gene, basically telling them not to have kids with other carriers. And so it rose to like prominence in the 70s, and because of that, there were actual programs that were put in place that started to treat and teach the Black community how to care for people who had sickle cell. And so, like, for those of us that are, hip-hop fans, we know that last year we lost Prodigy from Mobb Deep to sickle cell. Well, complications related to sickle cell, and perhaps something weird, the choking on the egg. But gosh, this just sucks. But he was a product of one of these, of that wave of like, now we know what to do. And so as a result, he was able to get through his childhood and actually hit the age of 40 before he actually died from it. And that wasn't happening before. People weren't surviving beyond like 8 or 9, 10 years old before then. And so we were living in this world where there was a lot more sponsorship and research and stuff like that between the 70s and the early 2000s or so. But then cystic fibrosis started to get rise to prominence in terms of media coverage in the early 2000s. And guess what? Cystic fibrosis affects more white people than they affect Black people. And if you look at the research between the two, they're somewhat similar. They're not the same type of disease, but they kill people in the same kind of way, basically. So they're somewhat similar. But as cystic fibrosis is starting to gain more attention, research money is filtering into the research to prevent that or to find a cure for that. And as those fundings are rising, sickle cell anemia fundings are dropping, and they're actually like closing clinics
clinics that cater to sickle cell patients and things like this. There's actually a really good podcast, a mini-series podcast called The Realness, which is a little bit, it's mostly about Prodigy, but it also covers the story of basically of sickle cell throughout it. It's like a 6-part series, and I think it's put on by WNYC or something like that. It's a really good series.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But they're the ones who made that correlation for me, where they were saying like, hey, sickle cell was losing funding. They were saying things, they were making excuses to the people who ran the clinics of saying, hey, we're not going to put as much money into treatment because we have to put more money into research. And the doctors are like, but you can't do research without treatment. How else are you going to learn how to treat these people?
Yeah.
But so like all these sickle cell clinics are starting to close, and then there's all this extra support and all this extra funding for cystic fibrosis. And the major difference is that sickle cell is mostly affects white people, and cystic fibrosis mostly affects white people. So when you look at something like that, it's not like there's something in a report somewhere, or at least I hope not, that says like, hey, we just realized cystic fibrosis kills white people the way sickle cell kills black people, so let's reroute that funding. It's not like that's written somewhere.
Right.
But you see those types of things happen, and it's not like they've cured sickle cell yet. It's still a disease that affects a lot of people. They are learning how to treat it and manage the pain a little bit better, but the treatment for people that have sickle cell is pretty rough, because these are people who are in intense pain. If they do go to the emergency room and not their direct doctor, and they tell a doctor, hey, the only thing that works for managing this pain is morphine, then they're going to be looked at like a drug addict because they're black, and they're not going to be treated well. And so that's how a lot of patients die in the emergency rooms and stuff. But you don't have that same kind of experience as a white patient. You're not usually not believed in terms of like what's wrong with you and stuff. And so this is an example in which colorblindness would not like it wouldn't help.
Be detrimental.
Yeah, like if you're just going to assume that everybody's the same, I mean, I guess it could help in that case if you assume everybody's the same, but you would have to assume everybody is the same as white people, and that white people aren't, because you believe white people aren't liars, and that's not what happens in the medical field.
Right, exactly. And I mean, and this might be a side thing, but I mean, it's, there have been tests and studies that show that doctors tend to believe that, or to not believe black men and black women's pain threshold, as in, oh, she's not, there've been many times when they're like, oh, she's bullshitting, or she's lying. She's just trying to get drugs, whatever. Exactly. And she's died, or she's, had a very, a near death experience. And they've kind of come back like, oh, well, I don't know exactly what the test showed, but they just don't believe them. Yeah. And if their color blindness, it would help, then okay. But I just don't think that. I mean, I think that when it comes down to situations like that, then that's when they do specifically look at color. Yeah. That's when they say, hey, I have to look at this in that certain, in that sort of way. Now, I mean, at my job, we screen donors for, the black donors are done cystic fibrosis, but also they're doing sickle cell. The white donors don't. Really? We do have genetic traits that are tested specifically for, Jewish donors, familial dysautonomia. There's Gaucher's, there's Tay-Sachs that are Jewish.
Right. Isn't there something about how, like, before Jewish people are allowed to marry, they're supposed to get the test to know if they're carriers for something that affects their children negatively?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, our Jewish donors, I think French Canadians is like some weird off chance that French Canadians also have issues with Tay-Sachs. But yeah, there's a panel that the Jewish, has to go through. But, for us to know that, they would have had to have had funds. They would have had to have things like that. Like there may be some other things that, African Americans, but I mean, I think that it helps that, money has to go to those things. And for us to know that each other has a specific thing, they need to be able to see color and say, hey, look, this is for African Americans. This is for, Jewish born people. This is for, so you have to do that so that you can funnel that money and not funnel it away from, away from some people.
I mean, look, Serena Williams, with all the resources resources that she has, she is almost not believed, and she had to fight for herself, for her own safety, to be able to survive giving birth to her first child. If colorblindness was working, when she said, I think this is what's happening to me, they would have believed her, and they would have proceeded, forward and saving her before things got as bad as it did. But instead, they just, there's that thing where people believe that black bodies are more hardy and substantial than white bodies, and that they just don't suffer the way white bodies does. And there might be something to that in the sense of there was literal breeding during slavery time, so putting the best black specimens together to to have there's probably a little bit to that, but not in a way where you can try to determine someone's health based off of black people tend to be hardier and therefore don't get sick or wouldn't know their own bodies or wouldn't know how to manage their own diseases.
Yeah, and I don't think that it actually is based on anything but the mentality or the way that they thought. Okay, hey, we got this big mama over here and this big daddy over here. Let's put them together and and have a good thread stock. But I don't think that. In mentality, they're thinking, hey, shit, he's big, she's big. We're going to have this, this monster of a person. And then they stopped having empathy or sympathy for the pain and everything because of where that person came from. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that there may have been passed down saying, hey, we whooped their, and it could be, they whooped their ass. They did, so much to them that maybe over time they were like, well, shit, hey, do you know what they had to go through? And in the back of their mind, it was like, damn, son, okay. So they're probably not as, it doesn't hurt him as much as, the delicate lily white, person. Right. You know what I mean? So
the worst part is that it translates into the black community as well. This week, I don't know why this happened so much this week, or maybe it was just because I was more heightenedly aware of it. I saw all these tweets about, this one guy tweeted that he was black and a black patient of his didn't want him to draw her blood because she said he looked like he should be a cleaner, not qualified enough to take her blood. So he says, I took my gloves off and I walked away. And then another person tweeted that he goes in to do a scan on a patient, and he was black, and the patient was black, and the black patient says, no, I need a white radiologist because I don't think you're qualified. And it was, it's happened even into the community. It poisons their own community to think that black people can't be qualified for things. Black patients can't know what their pain is, whatever. And I don't want to pull it all the way off a topic, but I use the health stuff because it does talk about if colorblindness was going to work, that's a place where it would need to work, right? You would need doctors and nurses and things to believe people of color and not see their color and just see them as a patient, and that doesn't seem to be happening. So
yeah, and I think that to your point, when it's something that benefits them in a conversation with a person, hey, I'm this type of person. That's when colorblindness really benefits them. But colorblindness, in any other situation, doesn't really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so there's almost a lack of awareness of any other time except for a discussion about race.
Exactly.
Where that awareness would be there, and
most definitely, yeah. So it's kind of a weird, it's kind of a weird situation where you can especially push out some, a narrative or an ideology for only when we talk about things, when we talk about something.
And it's not like this topic is something independent of other stuff we've talked about. We say things like this all the time, right? We would love it to be so equal that we don't need to say, hey, why aren't there more black people on TV? Or hey, why is the black guy always the friend that says damn in the back? We want this world to be a possibility, but because it's not, we almost want overcompensation. We want to be equal, but at the same time, because we know that it's not that way, we want more. I would rather be saturated with black people on my TV shows and my movies and stuff like that, to compensate for the 40 years that precede, in the beginning of my life in which I almost almost exclusively saw white people all the time. You know, that I can't just see a regular ass movie that doesn't have to do with the race of a person if it's black. You know, like we talk about the black versions of stuff, right? You can't have a love story as tragic as Romeo and Juliet with black people without it being the black Romeo and Juliet. You can't have The Hangover with black actors without it being like, oh, that's the black hangover, but also it went south because they're ghetto or they're trash or whatever.
Right.
You know? So with colorblindness, it's the same thing. It's like, I do want to get to a place in which things are so equal my race doesn't matter anymore, but because that's not a possibility right now, I want you to see exactly what I am, and I want you to see the disadvantages that I'm at because of the color of my skin, and therefore overcompensate to help me out.
Right.
Like, honestly, like, that's it. I don't know how else to say it.
No, I mean, it's said. It is one of those things where you just recognize, like I said, just see me as me, and we're all good. You don't have to put yourself in a situation where I say, hey, if this person doesn't think that I see them as black, then I can therefore be okay. But in a sense that...
What a weird ass notion
to think that, right?
This black guy's gonna like me better if I pretend I don't see that he's black. What?
Right.
Why?
Right. I don't know. I mean, it is counterproductive. It is counterintuitive to think, hey, listen, I don't see you as a black person, so therefore we're cool, bro. Like, no.
Yeah,
I mean,
that sucks.
And in a sense, it kind of dehumanizes a person. Right. Because when you teach, like if you teach a child to be colorblind, regardless of how, you're raising them or whatever, you're essentially telling them, listen, if someone isn't white, pretend that they look like you so that you can be friends.
Yeah. Like, pretend that they look like you so that they're human to you. So
we can also be cool. You know what I mean? So it's a weird, it's a weird dichotomy.
You can only have empathy if you think of them like they're white versus if it really is, I just saw you as human, then you wouldn't question that all this stuff that is happening. You wouldn't need to deny that you're seeing color because all this stuff is happening. You'd be like, you know what? There is a disproportionate amount of black people in prisons or killed by the police every year or, followed in grocery stores or whatever. Like if you really were empathetic enough to see everybody as human, then you would notice those things, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you would think.
Colorblindness only allows you to hide from the negative things that happen to people of color.
Right. And you should, stripping them. Because I think that's what they try to do is you kind of strip them of an identity that they don't understand. So therefore they can be on a level playing field so that they can then say, hey, we're all human. Right. And I get that. I get that notion that, listen, I'm telling myself that they aren't black. So therefore we're all human. And then it goes back to, then you're missing out. You're missing the point. You know what I'm saying? You're kind of missing a misunderstanding. We are humans, and therefore we do have the similar things, like I said before in the podcast. The black person that you just met is just like the black person that you already know. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's hard to, and especially us being mixed and getting to that point, is that if a person kind of says that to us, but then they ask you what you're mixed with, so what you're doing is you're taking those boxes out and you're saying, I don't see boxes. But what box would you be in if I were doing that?
No, right?
Right? Like, so if I were to be, what do I, you know what I mean? And it's never the one that is what they are. Right. Oh, right. Or they, so it is a situation where you're then still thrust back into a different situation where people are then looking at you differently. Right. It's kind of a weird thing.
And like, I don't know with using it as a topic for us to talk about it today, like, I don't know if we're doing the topic justice enough or anything like that. Right. I just know that it's one of those things that, like, we really need to expose, and we need to encourage other black people to call white people out on that when it happens. Right. Not allowing people to get away with it is going to be the only thing that teaches people that it's fucked up to do, like, right. I mean, I know there has been times in my life when I kept myself quiet when faced with something that was sort of like softly racist, I mean, I still think that everything racism is just like, it's just racist, but when it's like racism with good intentions, I mean, that's like a real thing. It's hard to describe, but it's like a real thing. We've seen it many times. It's me walking into a job interview and someone knowing that my name is Sharmane Latrice, but then turning around and going, "Oh, well, isn't this pleasant?" Because I don't present as dark or whatever. And that, like, to me, that's still racism. But they seem to think that that's like a sweet thing, like it's a positive thing. Like, I really want to be white, and therefore it's nice of them to notice that I'm not as dark skinned as other black people. You know,
it's a situation. It is one of those things where it's, I think that we do have as mixed people, and we have a good situation where we can say to people, listen, I feel you, because I mean, some black people would say, bruh, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know what I mean? And then it might get off to a bad situation. But I think we as mixed people can sit there and be like, I get that you think that sounds okay, but this is how I need to educate you on why that's not okay. Why that it may, while in a sense it may sound, and I see your intention, and I shake your hand, and I'm grateful for that intention, because let's take that intention and direct it towards this. See me as an individual and what I am, and then go forward. It doesn't need to be the factor that you always look at me with, like, hey, he's the black guy, he's the mixed person that is really nice. It doesn't need to be that, and I'm glad that you don't see that in your own way, but let's move in a sense that he is the mixed person that I like, or he is the mixed person that we now have opened up ourselves to, and then just talk about all of our other shared things, because that's really what it is. We all do have shared interests, shared situations, shared the things we've gone through. Let's try to find common ground on different things, instead of saying, now that I've made you on the same level field in my own mind, then I'm okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, like in any kind of interaction with me, I would want the white person to not assume that I would want to be white or whiter. That it would make me feel good to think that they're seeing me as a white person, because actually that would horrify me. Not because of any anti-whiteness on my part. It's because of, I am proud of being mixed. I enjoy my mixed heritage. I love my blackness. I understand that I'm incognito and I'm a little, it's not obvious to other to non-black people, but like, I'm still proud of it, and I want to talk about it, and I want to share about it, and I want you to understand that the reason why my perspective on this thing at work, or this food, or this, that, or whatever, comes from the fact that I have this mixed heritage and stuff. And I don't want to also be the bridge to a white person to, well, okay, I'm not ready to fully get on board with dark-skinned black people, but like, since you're kind of black and because you're a little militant, like, you don't, you could be my gateway, you could be my bridge. Like, I don't want to be somebody's thing like that, but I have been that person. Like, I know that I have been. We can't be the liaison, the liaison to the blackness. I mean, like, I want people to understand that also when I react or get upset at a person who does do one of these well-intentioned but racist things, that they understand that my anger or my upsetness about that is the fact that it should not always be the person of color's responsibility to correct bad behavior or racist behavior. But we know that if we don't do it, it's not going to ever be corrected. It's not ever going to get done. So it's just so frustrating to have to sit there and constantly explain to people, like, look, this is how you fucked up there. Sometimes I do it nice, and sometimes I don't do it nice, and the times that I don't do it nice is usually because I've been weathered by how many interactions like this I've had. And I have some people that are just like, I've had people who have sent me messages who have straight up said, I'm really dumb about this, and here's the reasons I'm dumb about it. I live in a town that only has white people. There was one black guy who came into town in 2012, and everybody met him. Like I've had people really break down how little interaction they've gotten with people of color to me to preface what they're about to say, anticipating that it may be racist, but that they don't mean it to be, and they want me to correct it for them. Like, I've had that experience several times. And again, like you say, while I appreciate your attention and your effort, and even maybe your awareness that you know you're about to say something kind of messed up.
Right.
It's still that frustration that it's my job, you know.
Right.
But at the same time, I guess I would rather it be my job than leave it up to nothing. You know, everything that I talk about on all these shows have to do with me wanting to be the representative of and not wanting to be the representative, and not it being required to be the representation of. Because I've had people also say, well, like, you've said in this episode that, you know, you don't want to always have to tell people what you are, and yet you're always talking about being mixed and being proud. And it's like, yeah, I'm both of those things at the same time. I both actively want to, like, live my mixed ass life out loud at the same time that I don't want to have to tell you what I am. And I wish I looked a certain way that you could just look at me and be like, oh, you're black, Japanese, and white. I can tell from a mile away. And I know that's never going to happen. Like, I know that there's nothing that's ever going to make that possible.
Yeah, I mean, and it, you know, and I guess that is us coming to terms with our mixedness in a sense that we are going to be in situations where, fuck, I wish I didn't have to do this, but I guess I'm going to have to do this. Mm-hmm. But, like, I mean, to your point before, though, I mean, I guess when you talk about a person's intent, I guess that's we have to go off of. Do we have to go off of that? Because I mean, I get that they're trying not to, but is their intent meaningless, or is their intent?
I mean, that's a good question, because it could also be an act too, right? Like, right. I mean, so. Oh,
I get that shit all the time. I mean, it's, oh, bro, I don't. And you're like, bro, you're super racist, and I know when you're not with me, you don't say that same shit. You just you kind of say it to me. You could see by a person's the way that they even say it. Like, if they're really sincere and they're just like, hey, you know, I mean, I don't see people as blah blah blah, and you kind of say, hey, listen, you know, I get that, but this, like, let's steer it this way. But there are some people that kind of say it in such a way that you're just like, you're just saying that to say it now. Yeah, you're not real. Your intentions are garbage.
The worst is when you see the person who is down with all these people of color, and maybe they're in a situation where a bunch of these friends are all together, and so they're having to introduce them, and the white person code switch between using their black guy voice to introduce their black friend and then using their white voice to, you know, they're switching between. I think Key and Peele illustrated it really good in that it's a sketch where they're sitting at a bar and they're just talking about regular stuff, and then, like, every white person that walks up to them has to acknowledge their blackness in some way. So there's, like, the one white guy that's wearing, like, a Tribe Called Quest t-shirt, and then either Jordan or Key says something about, like,
who's your favorite member of Tribe?
And he's like, yeah, I like
Smoke weed. You know what I mean? Yeah. Love him, dude. More behind the scenes.
You know, and, like, he doesn't know any of the band members, and and then, like, the white lady walks up and she's just like, I don't remember what she says, but it's one of those sketches where it's just like, you see that sketch, and as a person of color, you're cracking up because you're like, that has happened to me 4 times today. You know, like, some version of that.
Yeah, and I think that they did a great job of putting a lot of those. I mean, a lot of times, yes, it was like black and white, but a lot of times, because they're both mixed, I think that they did a very good service to show, like, the kind of things that we actually go through. I think they even did it. Have you seen the trailer for the new, I think it's called Night School, with Kevin Hart? And he's in Tiffany. It's Kevin Hart, Tiffany Haddish, and the guy from Saturday Night Live. I don't know exactly his name, but he's on there, and I guess he's the principal of the adult school. And, you know, when he's talking, I guess, you know, Kevin Hart and Tiffany are in there with the principal, and he's like,
I'm the principal of this school. I can do whatever I want. You're in my house.
And he's like, wait,
are you using a black voice?
No, I don't hear color.
And and you see that, you hear him, the white principal, trying to be down in a sense, and you're just like, bro, you don't got to do that. Stop that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, don't do that.
What is that, though? Is that the opposite? Is that that's the opposite of colorblindness a little bit? Because they're trying to show you that they do see you, but they're showing you just a racist way. We're not going to solve this problem, but it's just that we want to talk about it and get us talking about it, right? Which is like, call your white friends out, or the white races that are in your life for whatever reasons that they have to be there. Like, sometimes they're related to you you or you married into them and stuff like that. Like, you know, call them out when that shit happens and try to make them aware of their fuckery. Like, I think I said this before, but maybe I saved it. I don't remember. But the very first week that we released Militantly Mixed, it was the episode with John Corbin, half black, half white in Canada.
Right.
And in Twitter somewhere, like through his feed, he was tweeting about the show, and a white lady had responded to the tweet at which I was tagged in, so I got to see it, and it was something like, I listened to your show, I'm a white lady, I listened to your show, I didn't know I made these mistakes that you guys talked about it, I'm gonna try to do better. And I fucking rode that high for like weeks.
Bro, that's all.
Like, that's how you want people to react, right? Like,
that's all. It's
possible that you could be unaware of your racism because you're conditioned by your environment, like how you grew up, the way your parents were. Like, we're indoctrinated across the board, like not just in religion and behaviors and beliefs and stereotypes. This stuff happens to you throughout your whole life. And so it is conceivable that a person could go their whole life completely, and especially if they have limited interaction with people of color, be unaware of things, you know. And sometimes, like, I've had the reaction where I've told the story about, like, you know, why it's kind of racist or not your place, white person, to ask me what I am, and then a white person who likes me and is a friend of mine will say, but, you know, why can't I? Because, and then they start to try to give you all these reasons why, like, I'm really interested in other cultures and I like to expand, and I, you know, it is right. And you want to say, yeah, it's possible for you to have that curiosity, but it's impossible for you to not other me when you do it.
Exactly.
You know? Right. You're telling me it's just this thing where you're saying that because white is the standard, the accepted standard, I'm identifying you as different than white, and so let's talk about it. Perform for me. Tell me why I should be interested in whatever your deal is. And if they catch it, if, like, this lady who said that, like, she caught it and she was like, I'm gonna try to do better. I responded back to it like, thank you for saying that. Like, you know, it was almost better than hearing a mixed person say, I stumbled on your podcast and for the first time in my life I felt like I was seen. Like, that shit, I'm getting that at least once a week, every week. Right. And I'm like, that is everything to me, because that's why I wanted to do this. Like, I wanted us to feel like there's other people like us out there and that we're not these little islands all over the place. But hearing a white person react to, oh shit, I've been fucking up.
Right.
I'm going to try not to do that. Like, that's perfection. It's amazing. It's so great. And it happened one other time where I met these two white ladies through a podcast group, and they had questions, and we had gotten on the same feed, and we were like responding back and forth, and we liked what each others were saying, and so we ended up having a conversation off board. And one of the white ladies said, well, I was really interested by the stuff you said, so I listened to your podcast, and, you know, I heard the thing about, like, white people always asking and just feeling like it's their place, and being frustrated by you not revealing it right away, not giving them what they want. And she's like, and so I've been thinking about that all week, and then I went to a wedding in which the couple was the couple was one race and the child was a different race, and the adopted child, and she wanted to act, like, she felt her curiosity the whole time, wanting to know what the kid was, wanting to know why they had that particular kid, like all these questions that had to do with the race of the child and the race of the couple. And then she goes, but then I remembered what you said in your podcast, and I remembered that just because I was white curious didn't mean that I was entitled to the answer, so I never asked the question. Right. And I was like, see, like, this is the stuff, this is why we have to do stuff like this. We have to raise awareness to point out when people are making these mistakes, because even when well-intentioned and just curious, you don't realize that your curiosity is hurtful to the person on the receiving end. Right. And so, like, I don't want to fully exclude, except for when I'm in a bad mood and, you know, there's just been a whole lot of caucasity lately or something like that. And then I don't want to be very forgiving of it. You know, I want to give people a chance to say, yes, they're well-intentioned, and just their ignorance is so deep that they don't realize the racism. And then sometimes I just don't care, and I'm like, you're fucking racist. Let's deal with it.
Let's just deal with that. But it's one of those things where it's really only about race, right? It's really only about race, in the sense that you never go up to people, you know, like, I don't go up to a lesbian couple and say, well, I only see people as heterosexual, or I only see, right? No. I don't go to some type of wedding that is, you know, well, I only see, you know,
it probably
we're all
happens
Catholics
to trans people, though. If a version of that probably happens to trans people.
Yeah.
I only see you as male, or I only see you as female, even though you're.
Well, yeah, I mean that's ruder than than anything.
I think that's there's something kind of worse about that to me than racism in some kind of way.
But you see what I'm saying? Like it never comes back to where somebody just has a default religion or a default sexuality or a default this.
I just see you as
always
Christian.
Race.
Yeah.
That's a default, and it's always their default. I don't go around. I'm not Catholic, but I don't go around and be like, what? I always see people as Catholic, but I don't even believe in. I don't even believe in shit. In my book, we're all good, buddy, because it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
It's just
why should it with race?
Right. If there's any takeaway from this kind of like, I don't even know how to talk about this, I just want to talk about it type of stuff that we do on this show. Exactly. If there's any takeaway, what I want is to first make white people massively aware of the fact that by saying you just see us as regular, because I've been told that before.
Regular.
This happened when I was driving somebody, and we were talking. She gets into something, and she was one of those like crunchy granola white people that like wanted to make sure that you knew that they were cool with everything in the world. And at some point, I said something about the podcast, and that I think they asked what I do or something, and I was like, oh, I host this podcast about mixed raceness, and she goes, oh, are you a woman of color? And she pulls her sunglasses down, and she goes, oh, you are a woman of color. I didn't notice. I just thought you were regular. And she puts her sunglasses back on. And it was one of those, but you know how sometimes you think you're a warrior for every moment something happens until something happens you were so ill prepared for that you just, it just slides right past you. And I remember sitting there going, I don't know what the next thing that's supposed to come out of my mouth is. Like, I'm just a regular? Like, what the fuck is a regular? And, but this kind of stuff happens like all the time. So as a takeaway, I would want white people to know that like, just because they are white doesn't mean they are regular. They like but like the culture, the entire American culture as a whole has kind of allowed for whiteness to be the standard, and we're trying to bust that up and say like, no, we're fucking all different, and we should we should explore each other's differentness. We should celebrate each other's uniqueness. Eating foods of other cultures, learning other cultures and things like that. But let me ask you this. Is it only white people that actually say the colorblind statement? Because I don't ever hear black people say, oh, I'm colorblind, to white people or to Asian people. You know what I mean? Like, we don't kind of seen it in places in which I can't tell if it's sarcasm, like a Twitter or something like that, where someone's like, well, I just saw you as human. There's been times when I've gotten that in like a tweet or a social media forum in which one time I responded with laughter, and the person let me know I was reacting incorrectly to the thing.
Wow.
So, I think there are some folks that they want that so bad that they're willing to adopt it, or there is that get out minded black person that is just like,
true,
they're just so much in it that they can't pull themselves out. I mean, I would say my dad was that kind of guy. You could see it was so weird. He moved us to a black area, and yet always let us know how frustrated he was with blackness. It's like he was a self kind of hating dude in that respect, where it was just and it passed on to my brother too. He kind of has that going on too, where my reaction was different. I embrace blackness. I love blackness. And he would have been that, he's been dead for years, but he would have been one of those guys. He would have said, I just see you as human, or we're the human race, or any of that kind of bullshit. He would have been one of those guys. And so yes, I think they're out there. I don't know what they serve, honestly. I think it makes it harder. Right.
It's harder for me to think about it. It's for me to think that, and I think that the reason I don't see it that way is that because I've always, growing up where we've grown up, when I got with my wife and she looked like a white girl, and come to find out she's full Mexican parents, from Mexico, in Mexico, first generation, pretty much.
Did you clutch your pearls and how dare you keep it a secret from me?
Oh my goodness, you done just switched on me.
But I like white girls.
I like white girls. What am I supposed to do now? Damn it.
Oh no!
But just being with her, when I got with her, we would do a thing. It was we would see other couples, and we'd like, dude, I've never seen that. That's awesome. An Indian woman with an Asian dude.
Oh my gosh, I still do that shit.
In Sacramento, we saw a lot of that. So I think that because I've always been so mindful of, man, this dude is this or that person is this, and I've never really it's never been an issue with me per se.
Right.
So that's why I think it's weird for me to think that because I've only dealt with hey, what are you? But also I don't see it from white folks in that area. And I think that it was their attempt at saying, look, I'm cool, but it was, and then I had to say it was a little bit of disingenuous, but, there are some people that are, you know what I mean? That I had to say, hey, just, mind that shit because it doesn't, it doesn't help us all together. You know what I mean?
It's probably not cool for white people to have to accept that basically they're, unfortunately, because of what happens before the current generation of people alive, white people aren't going to get a pass on being racist. They're not going to get a pass on being ignorant about certain things. They're going to have to step up so that we can fix things. And, for the white person that wants to just be out there and be like, I just don't want to care about this. Like, fucking, yeah, we don't either. But the cops are still killing us, and we're still being followed in grocery stores, and we're not being treated in the by healthcare professionals, the same way that you are and stuff like that. So we can't just not want to. We have to kind of be. And
I think that this is the generation we have to care so that the next generation may not have to.
Right. I mean, who knows? I hope that every generation produces its hardcore warriors for this kind of stuff. And it starts to get a little bit better. But I get accused of all the time of being over the top about my frustrations about racism and stuff like that, and my reactions, or I get told I get told the stupid thing of why are light-skinned people so much more militant, and stuff. It's well, fucking because we don't get seen as what we are, one, and it's frustrating, and two, we want to be able to fight for the shit that frustrates us without you telling us we're not dark enough.
Yeah, we're too light. You know what I mean?
And so it's a frustrating point, but it's something that we have to actively be doing it, and it sucks that we have to do it, but we all fucking have to do it. It's the only thing that makes those, I'm not going to say that my podcast or this podcast or anything that you and I do individually in our entire life is going to change anything, but you hope that it impacts some people in some ways so that it does make it easier, when they're talking to their kids or for the next, that in some way they'll pay it forward. Like that lady saying, I realized it wasn't my place. My white curiosity wasn't more important than them just living their life and not, and so I had to swallow back that question. She goes, I'm still sitting here wildly curious and really, really wanting to know. And I remember laughing and saying, I fully understand and appreciate that, but you still put them ahead of you. And that's the part of that was important.
Right.
And so I hope that we make these kinds of little, I don't think we need to make a big sweeping impact, but we need to make those little ones. We need to get those handful of white people go, oh no, I do that. I need to work on not doing that. That's what we have to do. It's sometimes it's the small victories that really matter, and hopefully we get there. But I guess in terms of this show specifically versus the other show that I think is important is, or at least to me, what's important about it is to allow us as mixed people to be able to engage in blackness and be comfortable, you and I are comfortable in our skin to be able to talk about it. But for those who may be listening that aren't, or feel that they don't have a place in blackness to talk about it or whatever, but also for our full black brothers and sisters to identify the kinds of fights that they're supposed to be having too on their own behalf, really. In some cases, you want to lay low and you don't want to get involved because there's so much more risks to our bodies, it seems, than others. But I just hope that these conversations do kind of loosen up that, and hopefully people start talking back to us soon and let us know what kinds of things they want to hear us talking about, and if they want to engage with us, that would be cool too.
Yeah, and that's what it is. is that we needed to, you know, if we're talking on here and you're listening and you want to talk with us, come talk with us. Because that's, I mean, we're talking here to kind of understand each other and to understand what we've gone through and shared in a shared type of situation. And if they've been, have had a situation that is similar, call it, let us know, you know what I mean? So
yeah, we got a phone number now.
Yeah.
So if you do want to hit us up with either a question or a topic that you want to cover, or maybe, I mean, we haven't really talked about it yet, about maybe like actually inviting guests on, having panels and stuff like that. But if you want to do that, you can give us a call now and leave us a voicemail. The phone number is 323-545-6001. It's a Skype number, so it should go straight to a voicemail and you can leave your question. Just say what show, because it's for the ManeHustle Media family. So just say what show that you want to ask the question on, and whether or not you're okay for us to play your question or your statement on the show. That would be great too. And get at us. Let us know what kind of things about blackness and mixed blackness that you would want to hear about, because that'll be fun when we start to actually get to engage with other people.
Right.
That'll be cool. But and of course, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media, on Twitter, MMBlackAF, and Instagram, Militantly Mixed Black AF. That's the same for Facebook as well. And if you want to sponsor the show, because we are a fan-sponsored show, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymixed.
There it is.
I think I got it all.
Nice.
All right. Well, what do you want to talk about next week? You know yet?
What should we talk about next week? How people need to understand that
how I could just kill a man.
No, exactly.
Sorry.
No, they need to, I'm always the one that educates people on never step on a black man's shoes.
Right.
Or no, I don't know exactly yet. I'm
sure there'll be some fuckery we can go over next week.
Yes, you know it'll come to us. But it was cool. I mean, we can. Yeah, it'll come to us. Like we don't have to push it right now. It'll come to us.
All right. Well,
it'll be. Hey, it's gonna be on us in a couple days anyway. So
yeah, that's true. All right. Let's say goodbye.
All right, girl.
Peace, y'all.
Have a good one.
Militantly Mixed, the Black as Fuck edition is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and edited by Sharmane Johnson, co-hosted by MixedGirlMane and Blerdvision. Music is provided by Hwoodplayers and Pond 5. If you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, the Black as Fuck edition, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us on social media on Twitter at MMBlackAF and Instagram at MilitantlyMixedBlackAF. And if you want to sponsor the podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/militantlymixed. Peace, y'all. This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.